one of the goals of our business is to be one of the best shops in the world that creates custom pieces. Like my ideal scene with the company, I want to go to Dubai and design a table for one of these important people so they can have a beautiful space. Or I want to be the guy that when somebody sees a table and it's stamped with my branding item, they go, oh, wow, I know that guy or I know that brand.
Hey guys, we'll get to the podcast in just a minute. However, I am looking for more great guests for the Blue Collar Voices show, and I am planning a road trip across America and including parts of Canada. I'll tell you more about both of these at the end of this podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blue Collar Voices show. Today, I have a great guest. His name is Peter Erdei. He's a craftsman, and he works with wood. Peter lives and breathes wood, crafting wood pieces, both functional and as a work of art. Peter has woodworking in his blood. Just wait till you hear his backstory. I found Peter on LinkedIn via a post someone had shared. I checked him out and realized he'd be really interesting and a great fit for the Blue Collar Voices show. So let's get to it. Peter, welcome to the Blue Collar Voices show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that you decided to put me on your show. I'm excited.
I'm glad to have you. That is for sure. So, Peter, in a nutshell, tell me about your day-to-day with your woodworking currently.
I don't want to scare people, but yeah, I mean, I start pretty early in the morning. Just the routine is I get up around 5:30, and I go to the shop and just like you or many others, just got my first cup of coffee.
Right.
And then I sit down in the shop and I look at the projects and I kind of go over it in my mind, like where are we at, what we're doing with it, any problems we run into it the day before. Then I make an actual list. I call it the battle plan.
Okay.
It's really a battle, man. You come in here every day. I mean, it's not like an air-conditioned office. And it's kind of nice now because Florida is pretty cool temperature-wise, but it gets pretty hot in the shop. So when you start moving these 300, 400, 500, 600-pound slabs around, and you get covered with man glitter most of the day. You know, some people get sick of it. Like I had guys apprentice in the shop, and after about 3 hours in the summer, they look at me. They're like, "Dude, how do you do this all day long?" And I said, "You gotta love it. You cannot not love it and trying to do it because it won't happen." And then I have a lot of walk-ins throughout the day. We try to minimize that because a lot of time goes into answering questions. So my wife is after lunch, she's in the front office, and we try to filter the foot traffic. So because it's easily people come in 2-3 times a day, and then suddenly you find yourself you haven't done anything. So we had to put a bit of a control on that because I didn't mind answering people's questions.
Right.
It's the fastest way you make friends. But, we dive into the production and depends who's in the shop. I have a few guys working in the shop, and we have a really good relationship with everybody. I have veterans, retired state police, and I have a couple of apprentices in the shop at all the time. So I'm pretty much the earliest, and then everybody else shows up around 9:30, and we go over the production, or they ask what I need done. And if I don't have anything particularly that's pressing, then they just go on their own projects, and everybody rolls into production. Then we just produce all day long. We get through a bunch of stuff, and before you know it, you look up and it's getting dark outside.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's that's the average day, and then of course there's the delivery days, and then there's lunch and learns for designers and architects, and then there's meetings on job sites and various other programs that gets interjected in the schedule, and that spices it up a little bit for me because it's good to get out of the shop every now and then.
Sure. How many?
So that's
I was just curious, how many projects, as a general rule, do you have going on at a time?
I never say no to projects. I mean, depends on the size and what it is. At the beginning, we were doing pretty much anything that came through the door, smaller, bigger projects. And then after, as we grew as a company and we started to grow our clientele and our scope of sizes and commercial, residential, we started to put stops on smaller projects. What I like about this industry, there's a lot of people involved in this in my community.
Right.
And I apprenticed probably about 6 or 7 guys through the shop. And some people think I'm crazy because I'm creating
competition.
But yeah, I don't see it that way. I mean, there's so much to be done out there that even if we have 15 or 20 of me in this area, there's still plenty of work to do. It's just a matter of finding the right clientele, And when smaller projects come, I like to pass it on to my people that I know in the community, and it helps them. It flows them work, and then this way the client gets what he wants and the person who's doing it, gets paid. So it's a good thing.
Sure. And they're more suited for those small projects. It's more suited to their shop and their workflow.
Yeah, because some of these guys work out of their garage and they don't really want to grow big or do bigger projects like we do sometimes. So they just want to do the little stuff. And that's perfect for them. It's too small for me. Sometimes like doing floating shelves and stuff like that, or cutting boards. And I just give them the phone number and I tell them just to see these people and they'll gladly do their projects.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the largest project that you've done? You've talked about different scopes. What's something that was significantly large?
Well, it grows every year. Like the first year, I was happy to make dining tables and various sizes of tables, coffee tables, headboards and whatnot. And then a bigger commercial project came that was like 6 pieces for the same clientele. And then recently, I posted on LinkedIn a recent projects I delivered in Atlanta, Georgia. And my LinkedIn account literally exploded with requests and questions and reaches. And I had a guy who just reached out to me from New Zealand. I'm actually talking to him this afternoon. And they're building this massive campus in New Zealand. And he sent me the portfolio of the project. It's several buildings. These are recording studios, film studios, various other auxiliary buildings. And I'm finding out the scope of that. But this is going to be one of the biggest one, I think. And then a current project that I'm working on, which means I've done the design part of it and I've done the proposal part of it. This week, I'm supposed to be meeting a client who is doing an assisted living facility. This is going to be, if I want to put it numbers to it, it's like a $300,000+ project, which is for a woodworking shop like us. It's a pretty good size project,
Right.
Considering that you mainly do a few pieces at the time for a project or just one piece. This project is going to have hundreds of pieces, and we kind of excited about that because it's going to be done for elderly people, and elderly people stay close to my heart as I grew up with my grandmother being around, and I respect old people a lot. They have worked hard for their life, and they deserve to have a nice environment to live the remaining years of theirs.
Sure.
Yeah. So these are the biggest ones that we've done. Our business model is more like, we don't want to be like a cookie cutter company who does 1,000 of this and 3,000 of that, but we do more customized pieces, one-off pieces, things like that. It's more true to our business model here at Erdei Designs.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like you do a lot of tables now.
Yep.
And I noticed on your website, you have a picture of you analyzing a slab. You're in a room. There's a lot of different slabs there.
Yeah.
Are these currently in your inventory, or are you shopping?
No, you know, and this can be on the record or off the record, either way. But we started out as a wholesale slab business. This opportunity came around about 6.5 years ago, and I used to work for other shops and other companies, and I always had the ability to boost production into an affluent condition. I didn't mind to be a leader if I had to be. It didn't. To me, it was easy. I'm a people's person, so most people who work with me, we had a good relationship, and didn't matter
Right.
if I was a second shift supervisor for a steel fabrication company or I was a production manager for a construction company. It didn't matter. I respected my guys. I expected them to produce and get products. And if they run into troubles, I try to help them. But if they try to not produce and still get compensation for it, I got into their universe and I just kind of explained to them that this is not how it works. They have to be
Right.
in
Right.
exchange.
Yes, sir.
So, so basically, when we started the business model was just to sell domestic slabs, and we have a lot of beautiful slabs in America. It's really pretty what I've seen so far. So we were going to buy a bunch of equipment, and then we had a partner who wanted to be a partner. Actually, he wasn't fully legally our partner, thanks God. But we found out, to cut all the bad stuff out of it, we found out that he wasn't very true to our company, and he had a pretty major financial loss through his manipulation of business. Since this was the first business I have started myself, it was a learning curve for me. And, we have lost several hundred thousands of dollars because of it.
Ouch.
And my other business partner, he's a very, he was the finance guy, and he was the executive. He's a very tried business guy, and he was coaching us on how to do business. He has built several very successful businesses. He just explained to me that this is one of those phases where you got burned in business, and the best thing you can do with it is learn out of it. But he turned it over to me as, hey, you know what? I don't want this thing on my books anymore. Why don't you take all this wood and see if you can do something? So I found myself in a new building. It's the old building we had to move from, and pretty much the two buildings that I have, as far as you could see, it was just piled with slabs. I had about 600 of them. I found myself paying on the building first month, last month, security deposit, and we were pretty much at zero.
Right.
And my wife and I were sitting in the shop, and I said, well, we have 30 days to either make it or break it. So we're either going to have a big bonfire outside with all this wood, or we're just going to have to figure out how to create this business and make it go right. And, my wife is a teacher in a school, and she's just 5 minutes up the street. She was done with school around noon, and then she came over to the business, and then we just started cold calling people, scheduling tours. We printed out a few postcards, and my kids were 4 and 6 years old at the time, and I told them, I said, if you guys pass this out in Clearwater Beach and Bel Air Beach and all these various more affluent areas, I'd pay them 20 cents on a card, and then they basically went down to the beach for a weekend or two, and they start passing out all these various flyers and cards, and pretty soon we got a pretty decent sized project in, and really that's what got us started as a business. As we continue to work hard on our procurement lines for designers and architects and promotions through Facebook and any channels that we could use that was didn't cost much or cost nothing, we started to get more and more interest in the work, and I just had to produce high quality products, and I had to educate myself on certain things like finishing and more about woods and how to dry them, how to cut them, where to get them from. It was one of those learning curve for me, but I was kind of forced by nature, kind of molded into the interest of, hey, we got to do this, otherwise I'm going to have to go back to work for someone else. And the first year we produced, I think, like $240,000 in gross sales, which was, to me, was amazing, because working for somebody else, for a company at 18, $20 an hour, you're just not making that much,
That's right.
And it was great because it was up to us to be successful or not. So I couldn't really blame anybody else if there was no sales. That's kind of really put our head on as an executive, and we had to wear all the different hats in the company. Like, I had to do lunch and learns. My wife had to do cold calls to design firms, architects. Obviously, I had to build a few projects and, have those projects photographed, have some kind of a portfolio. And, we had a cool story, so we started to work on that. I was a third generation craftsman, that my grandfather was a master carpenter. And that was kind of a human interest. So people got very interested when we were discussing that. I just had to be true to myself and true to my goals, and just tell people the real story, how we started, and everybody loved it. And pretty soon, about 3.5, 4 years later, we turned into a company that now we work with about 65 different designers across the planet and several design firms, and we ship furniture right now all over the place. And we have orders out of state, local, but recently we've been having more out of state orders than local orders, which it's kind of an interesting phenomena here in our company.
Is that because of the internet, social media, that's allowing you to reach those geographical areas? Geographical, not geological.
Yeah, it's probably, LinkedIn is a very strong source for work for us. I had several projects from LinkedIn, and yeah, we have local projects, but the bigger projects comes out of state, and which is good. But I think because LinkedIn is more demographically more broad over the internet and broad over the United States, probably that's why I get more attention from out of state, because LinkedIn is just 500 million users and they're from all over the place,
What?
And local.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, local designers do come in, and we do work, but I haven't really hit the right target market where I can build a table, and when I tell the guy that the crafting of the table is going to cost $80,000, he doesn't blink. There's a couple of pieces of furniture that I built that was very unique, handmade, completely handmade. There was nothing in there that was machinery, and that was the real art part of it. Like doing the other tables and stuff, it's to me, it's not like a huge deal. But when somebody wants something more customized, like the last table I made that I delivered in Atlanta, Georgia, that was like a really cool piece. I loved making it because I had to do these 3-inch thick dovetail joints, and there's no jigs for that you can buy. There's nothing really you can do with that other than just trust yourself to do it. And then you have to get a really sharp, brand new Japanese saw, and have your coffee in the morning and just have a great day, and then cut it by hand.
Relax and take your time.
No, really. I actually, it took me almost, I think about 9 or 10 days to cut the actual dovetails, because I talked to an old friend of mine. He's a craftsman, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, I suggest you cut those dovetails that when you walk in the shop and you just feel it, that this is going to be a really good day. So every other day I was able to get to it.
Is this the table that you posted recently on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's the one with ambrosia maple, and it kind of has the dovetail connections on either end of the table.
That was a beautiful table. I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do some nice work. That's one of the things that I was looking at your work. I was like, oh my God, this is just fantastic.
Yeah, that came out nice. I was pretty proud of that piece. I mean, I love my work, and I always advocate that there's so much to learn about this industry. It's you can just never stop learning. And when people walk in, I'm always curious. Like I had this guy who walked in here. He was a retired. He's a veteran. He was in Vietnam and he was a helicopter pilot, and he just literally retired like a few years ago from Chevron. He flew choppers on the Gulf of Mexico to various oil rigs and stuff, and very humble, super nice guy, and he lives in somewhere around New Orleans in the suburbs of the city, and he showed me some of the handiwork he did, and I was just my jaw just dropped. I'm like, oh my god! I'm like, you made that? He's like, yeah, I like to fool around in the shop, and I'm like, that's incredible what you made. It's all hand carved. He's like an influencer for me because he's such an accomplished guy. He has seen so much in life, and he's in his, mid-70s, and he still finds a purpose to
just rocking and rolling.
Oh man, he was amazing. I was like just floored when I saw the stuff that he made, and I learned quite a bit from him. And I never approach anyone, even my apprentice guys. I never approach them that they don't know anything, or all they could do is learn, because everybody's got a different viewpoint. And I think a lot of my success comes from being open-minded to other people, craftsmen, or not craftsmen, just artists, because it really comes to a point of art. And art is kind of an arbitrary, because everybody sees a different thing in a painting or
absolutely
a sculpting or something like that. So when people come to the shop, I'm interested. I want to find out more about them. Everybody has his expertise, and whether it's social media or business or crafting things or painting and stuff like that. It's a never-ending learning curve, and I believe that the first barrier to study is to recognize the fact that you don't know it all.
You never will.
No, it's impossible. I mean, people walk in here all the time, and I try to hire people, and I put out some ads on hiring craftsmen. And I was very sad to find out that most people were not passionate. They really just wanted to clock in, clock out. And these guys didn't made it like longer than an hour in my shop, because just how they moved, what was their attitude towards the work. And the best people I've ever hired for the company, it was people who came in, they looked for a piece of wood. We started to chat it up. We started talking about their needs and what they do. And that's how I got a veteran in here, Jay. He's doing all the turning. He turns wood. Super nice guy. He's been through hell and back. He was a Marine for 8 years, and he was deployed in Afghanistan. He had quite a few deployments, and he got hit by a rocket launcher, an RPG-7. The guy was literally ripped in half. I mean, I saw the scar on his body. I'm like, oh my god! I'm like, how did you even survive that? And when people like that show up here and they're ambitious, they want to learn, I grant a lot of importance for that, because there's just so much to go through when something like that happens. I can imagine that, and I learned a lot from them, and we learned a lot from each other.
Right.
And it's a really nice synergy when you find guys that you can really understand each other, whether it's life or production or finding out new things. And these guys are motivated to learn more. So some of these guys, like I have a retired state trooper from New Jersey, and he's the smartest guy I've ever seen. I mean, this guy's so wicked smart. I can't even tell you. I mean, it's just, he has so many good ideas about woodworking, and he's not a woodworker, but he's very open-minded, and he's just great. these are the people that I love having in the shop because they're in high interest about what they want to do and what they want to learn, you know.
Right. That is fascinating. I think that's awesome having those kind of people in your shop.
Mm.
And I like your approach that you're always learning.
Mm.
And speaking of learning, I'd like to take a trip back to your childhood.
Mm.
And I saw on your profile, you learned from your grandfather and your father, and I'd like you to talk about that and how you got exposed to woodcraft as a child, how you became trained and educated in woodworking.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was an interesting story because my grandfather was from Romania, and he got his master carpenter certificate in 1918. Not so long ago, I found from my mom that she still had the actual certificate, like the actual paperwork with the picture on it and everything.
Right.
And yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's pretty beaten up. It's over 100-year old. But
Right.
I told my mom, I said, don't send it to me because I don't want it to get lost in the mail. But when I come home next, I'll just take it. And I just met a guy actually yesterday at a birthday party who his specialty is restoration. And he restores paintings, sculptures. He just had a jacket in his hand at the party that was part of the guy was a pilot in the Royal Navy in England, and he had this really cool jacket that was part of his uniform, and it had to be restored, and they're going to frame it and stuff. But anyway, I talked to him about the paper, and he said that he can restore the paper to a pretty good condition. So we're going to probably do that and get basically that certificate mounted in my office. So I have some memories of my grandfather because I was very little when he was around, but I don't have like vivid images of him teaching anything to me. But again, I remember the hand tools and the big planers and the wood chips and the smell, and it's all just very vivid in my memories. But my dad was, per profession, he was an electrician because he worked in a nuclear power plant as an electrician, and he was a pretty high executive on the electrical division. But he also did a lot of crafting with wood. So we built a lot of our furniture at home. So that was an experience for me to work with wood, and I always had a lot of affinity for working with wood and the saws and chisels and whatnot. And then I became, per profession, a welder. I was a welder for many years. Always, I worked in a nuclear power plant for about 4 years, on and off. Then I was a commercial diver in a nuclear power plant back in Hungary. And then when I went overseas in 1992, I was on a search and rescue ship on the Caribbean. We did a lot of search and rescue for about 42 islands we were sailing. But we were always doing something around the ship that was wood. It had to be done. And then 2000, I retired from the ship, or 2001. And then when I came on land, I was in a wood shop. I said, why not? So I was kind of done welding. That's when I really kind of started to pick up my woodworking side. And despite I haven't actively worked as a woodworker, somehow things that I started to make, it just came out right. Some of the things that my dad kind of passed down to me is that you have to be patient with woodworking. You can't be dispersed. You can not have a plan. You cannot not have anything in writing. You got to have a shop drawing. You got to have a sketch, something that you can go by. And every time I didn't have one, it always ended up being a redo because you kind of change things along the way, and then suddenly you realize that the changes were wrong, and then that things are not really what it's supposed to be.
Right.
So I did some pretty nice custom desks. It wasn't cabinetry really. It was more like custom work. So we did a lot of hardwood projects, desks, boardroom tables, various pieces of cabinetry that's made of actual hardwood but not plywood. along the line, of course, I met craftsmen and people who has done woodworking for decades, and I learned from them. There was a guy, his name was Chester Spirka. He was like a super, like meticulous guy who was working with me on a couple of projects, and he's the guy who taught me. And this is pretty basic, and some people might smile about this, but he said, "Don't ever work with a dull pencil. When you do woodworking, things have to go together like pretty tight. You can't just
Yes.
fake it and like steel work. If you're quarter inch too short, you just fill the gap. Cool. On wood, you can't do that. It's like
No.
it's either a tight miter or it's not,
Or it's too tight.
or too tight. Yeah, so it won't fit. So basics like that, like having a sharp pencil, is what really started my curiosity about. Hey, this is pretty cool. Like you really have to be exact with stuff. And throughout the years, I produced a lot of different products in different shops, and I just had the feel for it. I loved doing it. I had the patience for it, and it just evolved into this kind of a love affair with working with wood and stuff. And as I said, 6.5 years ago, I had this opportunity where I could get into the wood, but it was a very different niche of woodworking because this is all slabs and gigantic logs that you have to process and dry and transport, and you need to know how to cut the logs up. And there's so much to learn about that one particular subject. And I just decided to grab it and see what I can make with it. See if I can build a business and build a legacy for my kids and just really create something that's worthwhile. And I have a couple of projects that I'm working on within the company as well. That's kind of more projected into the future, but we can discuss that at a good point of the podcast.
So are you bringing in logs like today? Are you also, as part of what you do, get in logs and you cut them up and dry them for usage?
Yeah. I have a place in Washington State called Lake Stevens. We have a sawmill up there. We have a shop, and I have two businesses. One is making the furniture, which is down here in Florida, and I started a business last December where I was looking into doing something more with wood because we just had so many of them, and I ended up becoming a supplier for guitar manufacturers, and I supply like really high grade wood for these guys, and that was a whole separate origination or something that I wanted to do on my own, and I started that business in December. So because I know the business up north and who to go to get lumber, I always go and we find logs that's naturally fallen or development cut, and then we process those logs up north and dry them, and then we ship them down here.
And when you say up north, are you talking about Washington State?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is diametrically opposed. You're in Florida. Washington State's the complete opposite other corner of the United States. Do you have to travel back and forth very often?
Yeah, I go up there quite often. The reason why I went there because the slabs themselves, when we started this business, came from Washington State. And Washington is the best climate for trees to grow extremely large and beautiful, and the soil is really rich up there. There's a lot of forestry in Washington State. It's really, really pretty. And that area is pretty much like one of the oldest logging community, I believe, in the United States. Those people up there, like they have generation of just loggers and
Right.
people who cut trees, and there's a lot of development going on in Seattle area. There's a lot of beautiful trees getting cut down as invasive species because everybody wants to plant up there or harvest spruce and pine for building materials. And some of these beautiful maple trees are grown so big that it occupy enough space where you could literally plant a couple of hundred of these spruce and pine trees because they are more slender and they go straight up and vertical versus a maple tree that's like 6, 7 feet on the trunk and the crown of the tree is just enormous. I mean, it just occupies a massive space, you know.
Mm-hmm. And they'll have branches that just stick out oddly and go in different directions.
Yeah. And some of these trees, I tell you, some of the branches are like 4 feet wide. I mean, they're gigantic.
So, jumping back to woodworking, how do you make the decision between the techniques that you're going to use? Like you use the dovetails, which are a way of joining wood that does not require like a lot of mechanical fasteners, versus using screws and other ways of putting things together. How do you decide which methodology you're going to use?
Well, it's I guess it's a viewpoint. There's a lot of information out there how to do joinery, and it's very easy to get lost in it and get confused. So sometimes designers have an idea of how they want something to look. They don't know how to make it. Like, for example, the last table I delivered to Atlanta, Georgia was that was actually designed by two girls from a company called Terracotta Design Build. They're located in Atlanta, Georgia. So they dreamed the table. They sketched it up. They reached out to me. I don't know if they reached out to anybody else to make it, but I asked a couple of people locally if they would making it, and they were just like, "Oh, I don't want to touch that. Are you kidding me?" It's like, I don't know how to cut those dovetails. It's just so big. So I figured if they had a bit of a viewpoint on that, then my others had the same viewpoint elsewhere. But I like challenges, and when I saw these guys design this table, I wanted to make it. I said, "Hey, I want this on my portfolio. I would love to do it." It also always comes down to what is the client like. Some people likes just a clean look, no live edge, just a beautiful top with a simple base. And some people want it real fancy. They want grain matched waterfall table on both ends, and they want some epoxy in the middle, and they want electrical connections, and they want all the bells and whistles, And then some people are just wants the live edge tables with the base, and if I suggest something to them, then they might like it, and they go, "Hey, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's make that." But when it comes down to making the furniture, it really what is the function that you're trying to achieve? Like when I do an interview with a client, when they come in, I tend to do something like I ask them questions like, "What's your favorite color? How do you work? What is your daily basis? Like, when you walk into the office, how do you like to see the paperwork that you have?" And these are valid questions because I have clients who love to lay everything out on a gigantic table so they can see every parts of it. They can see the paperwork. They can see the sketches or the drawings or whatever. And after we finish going over what they really want to do, then I design the table, and it goes down to the details of, do you like to roll between the tables? Do you put your feet up? Do you like to have your feet up? What do you like to have on your desk? Do you do a lot of writing on your desk? Do you sit on your desk? And it all adds to the structure. How strong do I have to build it? Do you want something more conservative, or do you want something crazy? When people walk in, they just like stop walking and they go, "Oh my God, what's this?" And stuff like that. So once we narrow it down from all these questions, then I propose a type of wood, I propose a style, I propose a layout, how the table should be, how many drawers we should we have any drawers, stuff like that. And then we roll into the production of it after we created the shop drawings.
Okay. I'm just sitting here thinking about.
And then when he
Go ahead.
well, there's another part of it is which is very important is the finishing process. I mean, on finishing, there's books. There's a lot of books out there. I picked one book that it's always been with me since I've been doing woodworking, and it's a book called from Bob Flexner. It's called Understanding Finishing, and I really like the book because it goes through from the beginning of finishes, like how finishes were made, how to choose finishes, what kind of finish should you choose, and he goes into all these various processes of sanding, toning, tinting, epoxy work. I mean, it goes through everything. And I like to keep that one book as my Bible because it's very easy to get lost in finishing techniques. And there's a lot of really crappy finish process out there, and there's some really good finish processes out there. So I decided to pick that one book and just make it my go-to book when I have questions about finishing and stuff. And we have some finishing processes in the shop that we like to apply to various types of woods and species per se, because every wood reacts differently to the same finish.
Right.
And we have some really, really nifty finishing processes, like a 12-step process where, we take a great care of prepping the wood, and then he goes through a whole series of steps to get to where we want it to be. And it's most serious woodworkers know this finishing process, but they don't like to apply it because they consider it as a high risk finish. But it's not really a high risk finish. It's more like a patience game, because you got to wait between the finishing steps, sometimes as much as 5 to 6 days for proper drying time. But the outcome of the finish is absolutely phenomenal. It's just beautiful.
What is the material you're finishing with that takes that long to dry?
Well, oils are known to bring the most beauty out of wood, and different oils creates different effects on wood. Like boiled linseed oil will make wood more darker, like darker brown, darker shades of colors, whereas other like walrus oil will create a much thinner, much more conservative sheen and look on a piece of wood. But what we do with here is that we apply oil finishes in several coats, and then we apply an intermittent bonding between oils and top coats. Where people mind gets a little bit bent is that when we say, yeah, this is an oil finish, but it has a lacquer-based top coat on it. And they kind of go, wait a minute, you can't do that because lacquer dissolves oil. And then you say, well, you can. You just have to wait long enough to have the oil dried, and then you apply an intermittent coating, which is a shellac coat. And then every top coat has a sealer, normally, lacquer-based top coat. So we apply the sealer, but it's the how you do it and how much time you wait between these coats.
Right.
So by the time you get to the end of the process, you have this beautiful oil finish, but it's protected by an epoxy style mix of top coat that's a lacquer-based top coat. And the sheen is a dull sheen. So when you look at the wood, it almost looks like there's nothing on it, but there's actually 10 coats of finish on the wood, but you can't really tell. So when professionals come in, and we had an architect a few months ago who just landed a gigantic project on our lap, actually last Friday. He has offices in Dallas and Miami and here in Tampa Bay area. And when he came into the shop, he saw the finishing processes that we did. And he told me that he just came back from a 3-week leave where he visited wood shops in Vermont, Maine, Montana, Ohio. And he told me that he's seen hundreds, if not thousands of products in hotels because he builds hotels. And he said that the stuff that he's seen in our shop, it's the best quality he's ever seen. And I was like, wow, I was pretty surprised. And I asked him if I could put that quote onto emails with his name and company name on it. And he said, absolutely, no problem.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a true advocation and a high compliment.
It is. And it makes you feel good because, there's a lot of grind that goes behind learning what you know. And I work a ton of hours. I mean, it's a business owner life, but I do average 80 to 95 hours a week. And sometimes I kick it higher gears and, I've done 108, 110 hours a week. And I'm not advocating to do that much, but when you really love what you're doing, so, after everybody goes to bed at home, you're still on your phone, you're still looking at stuff on the internet about finishes and oils and study up on it and read things on Instagram that other craftsmen post.
Right.
So I take notes of it. I want to go try it out. Like, as you said, it's a constant learning curve. I'm always curious, like, what would work? What would be the next great thing to do on finish? Or what would be the next great thing to do with a piece of furniture that attracts a lot of attention? Because that's how you build your clientele list, is that you just create something that it's not out there. When somebody compliments you on your work, I mean, I call it pay for living. I mean, it's nice to get paid when you make a beautiful table. But for me personally, when I see a client in happy grief because of the beauty of the table you just created, and that piece of furniture will be in part of their life and it's going to make their life that much better, that's a very proud moment for a craftsman to know that. And I had to be educated on the fact that my final product, it's not just a piece of furniture, but it's emotionally elevated clients who are happier and they're more balanced in life because of the aesthetics in their life. And that is the real product there, because making a table I don't consider it a big deal, but changing someone's emotions for the better, and that takes some skills, especially when you do it through a piece of art.
That's awesome. I like that approach.
Yeah, and I advocate that with other craftsmen on Instagram. I used to do videos on Instagram, and I told people my experiences and how I feel about things when I make things. And because a lot of people don't realize they're artists, and when you point that out to them that they are artists, they have a whole different viewpoint shift of their actual purpose in life. And I had guys message me and said, hey, man, I just want to let you know that the video you put out, it really changed my viewpoint on who really I am and what my purpose is. And you're absolutely right. We changing people's lives because aesthetics, because when people walk into a messy, disorganized, broken, unbalanced space, they'll live their life in disbursement as a human being versus someone who walks into an office that's beautifully designed, beautifully executed, all the colors and shapes are matching and they're all in harmony. That person is considerably balanced in their life than the one who's not living in an environment like that. And it's a true statement because my clients tell me that.
Even if they don't have everything else in the whole environmental space of the way they like, just sitting down at a nice table, that can be awesome.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, truly, it's a proven fact that people working in an environment that's nicely made and it's in the space that they're picked or they're designed or they wanted, they have a lot more ownership for the space, for the people around them, and they're happier.
Well, that is all good information, and it's interesting. It's insightful. I love the approach that you're taking. You kind of touched a little bit about your goals and your plans for your business, about growing, and you brought your kids into it a little bit. So, what is your You think about the future. What are your goals and plans for your business, and tie that into your kids?
hmm Well, one of the goals of our business is to be one of the best shops in the world that creates custom pieces. Like my ideal scene with the company, I want to go to Dubai and design a table for one of these important people so they can have a beautiful space. Or I want to be the guy that when somebody sees a table and it's stamped with my branding item, they go, oh, wow, I know that guy or I know that brand. So that is the end goal as a product and as a business. Also, we do most of our things here by hand. So I'm building an apprentice program right now. I'm creating a check sheet that consists of steps pretty much throughout the entire shop. That includes the front office, making cold calls, contacting designers, doing lunch and learn, cleaning, taking the trash out, sweeping the shop, like basically the entire shop process until getting an actual product out the door, including packing it, making the crate for it. So I'm working on a check sheet that I'm compiling all these various steps with books to read, with practical assignments to do, and stuff like that. And I'd like to take 2 or 3 people, maybe every 3 months, to put them through this apprentice program. So, because it's really a lost technology. It's very easy to design something on AutoCAD and then throw it in a computerized machine or a CNC and then just have it carved or made or whatever. It's just a lot of automaticity, like there's not a lot of human soul and human thought process goes into it other than programming, which is in itself is an art. And I admire people who can do that because I can do that. And there's a lot goes into it. I'm always fascinated by computers. But when it comes down to actual producing a product by your hands, I see that there's less and less people who are interested in it. Or if there's interest in it, there's no place to exercise or build that knowledge and not enough space or schools. So I like to do that. And then as far as my kids concerned, I like to build a legacy. I like to build a legacy with the company. I like to have this company thought of after my days are over on this world is that, yeah, that place was awesome. They brought knowledge to people. They created incredible pieces that stays in the physical universe for hundreds of years.
Right.
And gets passed down from generation to generation. And, if my kids wanted to be part of it, I would love to have that. My kids in the shop as much as they can on their own voluntary, like, hey, Daddy, I want to go to the shop. I want to make something. And then I'll bring him. And my oldest son, he's 10. He just made a coffee table for my wife for Christmas. And my other son made a little other table for my wife for Christmas. And my kids are 7.5 and 10 years old, and they do epoxy art, and they get very interested with stuff like that. But if they decide that they want to do something else in life, it's totally up to them. I'm not going to force it because you can't.
Right.
You can't force something on somebody and love it. This wasn't forced on me. I choose it on my own.
Sure.
And normally, when you choose something on your own, then you're able to get better results with people who are involved because it's their own responsibility. It's their own power of choice.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, one of your kids could decide that they wanted to race cars or be a mechanic or, wanted to be an arborist. And if that's their passion, they're going to love it. And every day they go to work, they're just going to love being at work. But if they felt forced into doing what you're doing, even though you're passionate about it, they're going to resent that whole experience a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It's something is done that's it's not done on your own self-determinism, that will haunt you for the rest of your life. And I'm telling you this because I have experience in it, that I've done things that I really didn't want to do, but I ended up doing anyway, and it always kicked back at me. And I believe that people who chooses their own destiny of what they want to do and what they want to deal with in life, whether it's social media, computers, building rowboats, building sailboats, ships, welding, whatever their love is in, those people always do much better in life and they happier in life. People who just went because the parents pushed them, because there was nothing else better to do than just go for work somebody else. It's just a lack of responsibility, really what it boils down to. If you are responsible enough to create your own success with something you love doing, then it's a lot better reflection on who you are than just trying to go and work for somebody else for the rest of your life and you don't want to strike out, you don't want to create something cool. Then it just really boils down to the responsibility factor for each individual, you know.
Absolutely. I guess we're really, as far as this particular podcast, we're really reaching the end here. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I'm trying to create a track here that we could fit in a nice little package.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing a whole hour went by.
Exactly. One of my final questions that I have here is, and you've touched on it, how much impact has the internet and social media had on your business, both promotional and perhaps competition? Just kind of nutshell that for me.
Tremendous. I mean, it's honestly, without the internet, I don't think we would be where we are today. Just using LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook, and now we have this podcast, you know, I'm learning about it. We got so much exposure because of the internet. On LinkedIn, when I posted this particular table that I delivered in Atlanta, Georgia, it was, I mean, I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? You know, like within 4 days, we had so many reaches, so many views, so many comments. It was incredible. Like right now, we posted that like a week ago. Yeah, it was exactly a week ago. We over 170,000 views.
Wow.
I mean, where do you get that? Honestly, where do you get that? There's no way you could do that without the internet. We have over 700 comments on the actual product. We passed 5,500 likes. So that means to me that there's 170,000 views, and probably some people looked at it twice, but all it shows is an interest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh man, I want to go back and watch the video again on this guy. And when I see that exposure on Erdei Designs on LinkedIn, or I see that on Instagram, then I go, wow, look at that. We just reached all these people. And I believe that today, us as craftsmen, integrating this technology with what we do, it's kind of a unique mix, because what we do is like an old world craftsmanship that reaches back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And you put together a technology with that. I think it's so cool, because the more people can see this, the more people get inspired, if they get inspired. You know, I got feedbacks that people got inspired by my work, and I love it, because that is the end goal, to inspire someone to do something like this, you know?
Right.
And I'm just blown away how much the internet absolutely helped us to grow as a business, and just to see all the beautiful feedbacks and comments that's coming back from people on all of these postings that we do.
One of the things that, from my perspective, that made your video so intriguing is you didn't just post a picture of the table. You posted a picture of you spraying it, and you know, you could see that transformation. That is really what people love seeing. They like seeing the process of doing. And I'm just sitting here thinking now, outside the box, if you showed like a time lapse, maybe as you started assembling a table, just doing different things, cutting dovetails, and you assemble that into a time lapse video, and boom, you start out from wood and then it finishes and it's done. I bet that would get some great traction as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And I normally do that with, I did a couple of videos. Like I have it on LinkedIn. I did a beautiful oak conference table for the minor league baseball headquarters here in St. Petersburg. And I did a video from the point of picking the log out with this gigantic forklift, and a forklift is picking up the log, and it's literally tippy-toeing on the front wheels because the log is like 14,000 pounds.
Wow.
And basically the video in 1 minute goes through the log. The log is being cut. It arrives to the shop, the slab. We start working on the slab. A couple other shots and time-lapse videos on the actual process to the point of being delivered. And we did the unveil of the table the client did, and then the table actually in the space. And people loved it. I got a lot of great feedback on that. They were able to see the whole evolution of how the table came about.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm glad you've done that. It was just something that just kind of off the top of my head, so I threw it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea.
Well, Peter, it has been awesome talking to you. Literally, I could talk to you for hours, and I'd love to see your shop and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing what you're doing, talking about your journey and techniques and your business. And I'm looking forward to actually talking to you again in the future. But we'll wrap this up and call it a podcast. And thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity that I could go on your podcast. And I'm looking forward to it, to have other people hear it and take something home from it, if they can. Absolutely.
Outstanding. I will see you later, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, John.
You're very welcome. Hey guys, before you go, 2 things. The first is I'm looking for more great guests for the Blue Collar Voices show. Basically, I'm looking for those that excel in the blue collar arena and have actually got their hands dirty, truly understanding what it is like to do the work. Now, the second thing, and exciting, hey, at least for me, I am planning a road trip. Phase 1 is building a list of locations to visit. Some locations will be just a meet and greet. Others will be on-site audio and or video. Please check out the website for more information. I'd love to hear from you. Email me at johnc@bluecollarvoices.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. Thanks all. Looking forward to hearing from you. Blue Collar Voices is produced by John Chapman, and all audio, video, graphics are created and edited by John Chapman. Blue Collar Voices is a DR7 Media production.
I'll be back.